Welcome to Camera Shake Podcast, episode 43. We're back alive and kicking, and today we're going to be shaking it up with none other than Dunna Did It. Dunna is a photographer, full-time YouTuber, music producer, and multi-instrumentalist. That's right, I've seen your early videos, my friend.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
I went all the way back.
Oh, geez.
Which is awesome, actually, by the way. So, how are you doing, man? You okay?
I'm great. Yeah. You know, staying safe, staying warm over here. It's minus 39 today, Celsius.
Whoa.
So yeah,
Whoa.
she's cold outside. So I'm in my little studio room with as many aperture lights as I can use to keep myself warm.
Well, see, I have family not too far from where you are. So I have family.
Okay.
My family used to live in Canmore, in
Okay,
Alberta.
yeah.
And they now, my cousins now live in Calgary. And my aunt and my uncle have a place in Calgary, but they're also in Nova Scotia at the moment because mainly because they got trapped there through the whole COVID thing and they weren't allowed to travel across to different territories and all the rest.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But yeah, man, it gets cold. Hell.
It is nuts. Yeah. But absolutely beautiful at the same time. I've been posting some stuff. Actually, I just posted some photos from Canmore. They were from the summer, so it wasn't, it didn't show off the cold, but then I posted another one here that, you know, you see the hoarfrost and it's beautiful one way or another. Just looking through a window, it's nice and safe.
Yeah. I saw that post, your latest video on your YouTube channel to do with how to post Instagram carousels, right?
Yeah.
And I looked when I sort of glanced at it. I'm like, hang on a minute, I know that mountain. It's like, okay, cool.
Totally. When I first posted, because they were all photos that I had posted before, and when I first posted that specific photo of that mountain, the one that made it into that carousel. There were a bunch of other people who had just posted photos, like a bunch of people in the same niche, like other YouTubers and stuff like that, that had just posted photos. So I actually went out and started looking for other people. Lizzie Pierce had just posted one. I think Chris Howe and Lizzie were probably together. They both just posted them. So I went and started sharing photos of that same mountain, which is funny. We're probably all standing at the same turn off to take photos of these mountains when we took the photos.
Well, it's from my uncle's house where he used to live. You could actually see the Three Sisters right from the bedroom window. So it's a beautiful view. It's funny because you often see videos from Banff and Jasper and stuff like that. But Canmore doesn't really pop up that often. So it's like, ooh, okay. Cool.
Yeah, totally.
Nice.
I've got one in the bank that's it was just like a little vlog. We did the Holling Peak hike, my wife and I, and it's just outside of Canmore. We stayed in Canmore for the night and it's beautiful. It's totally underrated. It's a nice place to go that's not quite as it's still touristy, but it's not quite as touristy as Banff is.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's not as overrun. I mean, I must admit, I haven't been there in the winter. I've only been there in the summertime, and it's stunningly beautiful. So, I just highly recommend it. There's a place called the Iron Goat, which, my uncle's house was just around the corner from there. It's just like a bar restaurant type of place, and my sort of local haunt when I stayed there. So it's good. But you're in Edmonton, right?
I am, yeah. So I'm 4.5, 5 hours drive north of there. So I'm not actually very close to the mountains, which is too bad. It's far enough away you can't, a day trip is kind of tough to do, but you're close enough to tease you,
Yeah. And there's another thing, there's another video I came across where you and your wife went on a trip to Drumheller.
Mm-hmm.
And so the funny thing, my wife was born in Drumheller.
Oh, okay.
And so she because for those viewers and listeners who don't know, Drumheller is very famous for dinosaurs. Everything's a dinosaur, and the Royal Tyrrell Museum, which is one of the kind of I think most eminent museums for dinosaur stuff, for the lack of a better word. Yeah. And I was just watching that video on my phone actually, and my wife walked in and she just took a glance at my phone. She was like, "Why are you watching a video about Drumheller?" And I'm like, "Oh, that's our next guest on the show." She's like, "Wow, cool, awesome."
That's funny. Yeah. Yeah, it's a cool place. I think it's like it was the most heavily populated place for fossils, like where they find fossils and still find them regularly in maybe all of North America or something like that. I'm not sure about the world. I don't want to overspeak there, but I think it's pretty crazy how much they find in that one specific spot. And so there's museums there, and you can go on these hikes and expeditions and like try and find your own fossils and stuff. It's very cool. It's when I was a kid, we used to go there once a year or so, and it was always a big highlight because, you know, young boy loving dinosaurs, that's just the way to be.
Yeah, old guy loving dinosaurs.
There you go. Yeah, it doesn't change.
No, I tell you what was cool. We went. Well, the last time we went over there was like, it must have been like, what is it now? It must have been 4 years ago, because we were supposed to go back to Canada last year, 2020, which, you know, obviously we had to cancel because of COVID and the rest of it. Mm-hmm. And so we banked our flights. We were meant to go back this August, but it's not looking good at this point. To be honest, you know, probably not going to happen. But,
I wouldn't count on it. No.
It's just, you know. But I remember like sitting in my wife's aunt's house, and her uncle goes like, "Oh, do you want to see some dinosaur bones?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So he picks up this bucket from the garage, full with like dinosaur stuff, you know, like bones and like all sorts of like relics, right? And he goes like, "Yeah, I constantly pick them out of the lawnmower." So that's the thing. I mean, he's just mowing the lawn, and then, you know, ends up finding all this stuff. It's incredible.
Oh my goodness, that's wild.
Yeah. So you've literally just gone full time on YouTube at the beginning of this year.
Yeah.
So how, like, that's a massive, major step. How does that? Like, can you already compute what's happened?
It's been pretty wild. It's been interesting. I still feel like I'm transitioning. Like, I'm a full month in, and I still feel like I'm trying to figure out what it's like to be on this like non-schedule that I now have, or like I'm totally on my own schedule. So, I mean, for the past, I forget how many years I've it has to be 10 years almost now, or 9 years or something along those lines. I've been working as a music producer and recording engineer for quite a while. It was just kind of freelance stuff while I was teaching drum lessons and that kind of thing. But then I opened my own recording studio and music school, which I'm still part owner of and still work there. But that was the full-time thing. So that was 5 days a week, you know, kind of regular 8 to 10 hour days kind of thing. And then 1 day a week I would cram in doing a video for YouTube. As of whatever, 4.5 years ago, I started doing that. And then gradually it kind of started to be like, okay, well, YouTube is growing and growing and growing, and it needs more attention. It needs more space, that kind of thing, if I don't want to get kind of stuck at a plateau. And so just recently, we decided with myself and my business partner that it would make sense not only for me, but also for the business if I kind of swapped it. So instead of full-time audio, part-time YouTube, it's now full-time YouTube, part-time audio. So I am still working in the studio, mostly just now taking on only kind of the projects that I'm really excited about, which is great for me. Like, obviously, like, you know, it's cool to be able to be a little bit more picky. But most of it comes down to just now I have less time for that because I'm focusing more on the YouTube side of things. But yeah, it's been super weird. The one thing that I've noticed is that once I had more time to dedicate to YouTube, I started making my videos more complicated, which is just like everyone when I first kind of announced that I was going to go full time, everyone was like, "Cool, we're going to get 2 videos a week," and I was like, "Let's just hold off there because I know myself and I know that it's going to turn into something else. So I'm going to stick with 1 video a week." And sure enough, I started to make them more complicated, and in a good way though, where like all the stuff that before, when I only had my 1 day a week, I would have to crush in. And at the end of that day, or at the end of my edit session in the early hours of the weekend or whatever, I'd have to be like, okay, that's the cutoff. Like, this has to go up because I need to have a video up on Monday, just my own deadline, internal deadline. But at some point I kind of had to say, okay, this is good enough. Like, it's going up. And now I kind of have the time to say, okay, this is pretty good. I have 3 more days left. What else can we do with this? And so now I've been doing more titles and getting even tighter with my editing and all that kind of stuff. And so now, instead of being able to put out more content, I'm just taking longer to do the one piece of content that I kind of guarantee my audience every week. But I mean, I've also launched a Patreon as well. And that's been going really cool. We've got about 24 people in there now. With like a private Discord server. So that's taken up some time, kind of chatting with those people and doing a little bit of extra content for them, a couple of behind the scenes things and little extras like that. And that's been a lot of fun. And then I started doing shorts as well. So I guess I did make a little bit more content, but these weekly 1 minute or less than a minute YouTube shorts where mostly I'm focusing on kind of camera basics and such. So done a couple of little things that most of my audience probably already knows, but maybe it's a nice reminder. So that's been kind of the transition to full time. It's wild. I was just texting with a friend of mine and she kind of said, you got anything fun happening this week? And I just like bullet listed my to-dos, and it was just like, it felt weird to type them all out that way. But yeah. It's been, I've been keeping busy, that's for sure.
Yeah. What was the tipping point for you that made you think, you know what, now's the right time to switch that work lifestyle around?
I mean, it was kind of a couple of things. I mean, first of all, the YouTube side of things was more monetarily lucrative than my full-time job. Like that was at some point I started actually making more money doing YouTube than I did at my full-time job, even though I was only putting in 1.5 days a week or 1 day a week on the YouTube thing. And so then it kind of like, you can see where the value is from a monetary point, but there was still a lot of pride and stuff in the fact that I built my own, or I started a business with business partners and stuff like that. So I didn't want to leave that high and dry, but obviously with COVID and everything, being primarily a music school, with a studio inside of it. And my part of it is just the studio, but the primary part of the business is the music school. Obviously COVID is kind of gave us a big hit and stuff. And so there were lots of conversations about, how we're gonna deal with that and that kind of thing. And this was one of the ways that actually potentially could help the business, because I was a salaried part of the business before. And so basically what we did is switched me over to just being hourly. And now I just am going to take on a little bit less hours. It's only ever going to cost the business money when I'm also making money, essentially. And so it kind of, like I said, it kind of worked on both sides as the world kind of currently stands. So yeah, that was it. It was a culmination of things, I guess.
I mean, my hat's off to you, man. It's a brave step, and it's only after you take that step do you realize, my God, this was the right thing to do. I don't regret it in any way,
Yeah, and I feel really lucky that I had the ability to do it in the way that I did. Like for so long, I was able to work a full-time job and build up what I have now. Like there was no real jump for me, like there is for a lot of people, where they're like, hey, I'm making a little bit of money. If I had the extra time to jump into this, then maybe I could do more with it. Like I said, I basically built it up to the point where it was making as much as my salary job. And so then it was a relatively easy jump. Now, that being said, it's a lot more volatile. That's the big thing about the YouTube side of things, is like at any time, there could be a problem and my channel could get shut down, and then I got to deal with that. And that's a good chunk of my income or all those kinds of things. So it's about figuring out how to make sure that I feel comfortable with the amount that's coming in, and as far as just like making a living anyway. But yeah, so it's a little weird but fun.
Absolutely. I'm going to ask you the question that I can hear every single one of our listeners and viewers asking right now. Okay. How do you make money out of YouTube?
Okay,
that's the magic question they're all going to be thinking, and I know it.
Yeah, so I kind of have three main sources of income from YouTube, and they're almost split. Like it's almost a 30-30-30 kind of split, but it's affiliate marketing, and that's really heavy for me specifically because I talk about gear, I think. So I talk about a lens in a video, and then I put an affiliate link. And if people liked what I had to say about the lens in the video, they might go click my link and use that. And so I make a certain amount of money from affiliate links. And if you go look at my descriptions, I have lots of them. If I'm talking about a product, I've at least looked to see if they have an affiliate program or if they're on Amazon or whatever. And I do a decent amount of work around making sure that, I'm making commissions off as much as I can from as many countries as I can and that kind of stuff. And to anyone who's starting out in that realm, I highly suggest making sure you do your due diligence and making sure that you're not missing out on opportunities there, because it's nice, easy, passive income. The second one is just from YouTube Adsense, which is just, they put ads on my videos and I get a check every once a month or whatever. And from that one's a little weirder. And that one goes up and down with the amount of views. And that's where it's important to make sure that you're on top of understanding YouTube and you're trying to get views and stuff, especially if you're relying on that specific one, making sure that you're keeping your view count up and that kind of stuff. But the nice thing about that one is that if you have a couple of videos that really pop off and do really well, over a long term, which is kind of how my channel is working right now. Like my top 5 videos in any given 90-day period are probably at least a year old, and then, and sometimes those videos weren't even ones that did really well right off the bat. They might have picked up later. But so once you have a good catalog of videos on your channel, you're more likely to get more ad revenue and that kind of stuff. And I think that people get really discouraged when they've only got 10, 15, 20, 50 videos on their channel and they're not making a lot of AdSense, and they kind of forget that it's like you have to have a lot of videos running a lot of ads in order to make a decent amount off of that ad money. And I think I'm coming up on 250 or 300 videos or something along those lines on my channel. So there's a lot of sources there. And then the third way is through sponsorships. And if you've ever watched any of my videos, you'll probably have seen a couple of sponsorships, whether that be, the go-tos that everybody sees, Skillshare and Squarespace and those guys. Or I do a lot more kind of specific stuff with brands that I enjoy. I really like to do dedicated videos more so than the little 30-second stop in the middle of the video, but every once in a while, if it's a company that I do like, I do those ones as well, because they work for some videos. So, but that's kind of the 3 spots. So like the affiliate marketing, AdSense, and then the sponsored stuff, which is always really interesting to you can never really count on any of them. So there's a lot of work since I've gone full time in managing those kinds of things. That's been a lot of where my energy has been going, to make sure that in a month I will still be full-time YouTube.
So would you say that the driving quality content is going to actually drive all 3 of those avenues of income there? That's what's your driving factor behind those. That's what's going to keep it going.
I think so. I think that there are a couple of different factors, and the quality content thing is a tough one to kind of qualify, because when people think of like you've got to make quality content, the first thing that comes to mind is video quality, audio quality, that kind of stuff. But that's not really what people are talking about when they're talking about quality content. Part of it comes down to personality. And I think that that's something that a lot of people don't keep in mind. They think that it's only about the story or the information or whatever. And that is a very important part of it. But I'm really relaying the same information that all the other reviewers or all the other tutorial teachers and stuff are on YouTube. There are lots of them out there who are doing the same things. And I think the thing that connects me to my audience is at least partially my personality and the way that I put things together and the way that I show off my personality and that kind of thing. It's kind of like a trust thing. They need to know that they can trust you, that you're not a shill or you're not lying to them, which is a whole other conversation because it's mostly ridiculous when people throw around those accusations. But there's kind of a piece of trust, and then there's a piece of entertainment too. And I think that one of my strengths and one of the reasons that my channel has done as well as it has is because I walk this line between your buddy who like you can just have a coffee with, and then somebody who can really teach you something, you know. And part of that I attribute to the fact that I taught drum lessons for a handful of years once I got finished with music school, and so I learned how to teach kids how to drum. And that is not an easy thing to do. And you have to make it fun, and you have to make it entertaining, and you have to keep it relatively simple without talking down to them. And so I think that that's an important thing. When you're building quality content, you have to understand who your viewer is and really understand how to talk to them. And it's something that I am constantly tweaking and changing the way that I'm trying to connect with my audience, and something that I've been focusing on a lot since the start of the year, when I now obviously have more time to focus on that. And I'm not just like, I got to say words and edit them together and get a video for Monday.
Yeah, I think, you know, the thing about quality is oftentimes I think, you know, people think, especially when, you know, when you think of people who are thinking about maybe setting up a YouTube channel, you know, then you see something like a Peter McKinnon video and you kind of go, well, there's just no chance. I mean, if that is what good quality is, forget about it. Like, you know, and so this is this paralysis by analysis type of a thing where, you know, you just don't get started. And, you know, just... I might be in danger of boring our listeners because we've talked about this like so many times in like probably every single episode since we started. But the thing for Nick and me was when we first started this podcast, we had no idea how to podcast. Like we didn't know, you know, we talked about the idea on and off for 6 months or something. And then when COVID hit, you know, when the lockdown hit, we literally had, you know, we had like contracts canceled and projects, you know, being delayed and everything else. And so we're literally, you know, we sat down and we're going to like, well, okay, so what are we going to do now, right? And so we figured, well, this might as well be the time. Let's get started with the podcast, right? And so we had this conversation on like a Friday or something. And then we said like, right, we're going to record on a Monday, and that is it. Episode 1 we're going to record it on Monday. So we had a weekend to figure out how to do it. And I think we called the first episode "Done is Better Than Done is Better Than Perfect," because that was, you know, that was just the way to get started, really. And I think very often when people think that they have to, you know, compete with, you know, other filmmakers and other YouTube channels, that idea of quality is very often misplaced because there are a lot of aspects to, you know, creating a YouTube channel and filming videos and stuff like that you'll inevitably pick up over time. You just have to get started at some point. And you know, what's really, really super interesting when it comes to that is because, like I mentioned earlier, I actually went back and I watched your first videos, right? And,
no,
I'd be absolutely honest, because you started like with sort of vlog style videos, right?
Yeah, I did probably a full year of just vlogs, no camera talk or anything that. Yeah.
But even with the very first videos, there was already like a storyline there, you know, and I think you put a lot of yourself into that as well, because you talk quite sort of openly about, you know, losing weight and the kind of stuff that you were going through. And that really was actually already, you know, when I saw that, I'm like, that's sort of a channel I can follow because there's somebody with a personality that I really like, you know, that's like a likable person there. Do you know what I mean? And so it's really interesting to see over the course of 4.5 years how your channel has developed. And it's really it's absolute proof, I think, that something like YouTube or YouTube channel is really just, it's a marathon rather than a sprint. You're not going to get to be, Peter McKinnon in a week and a half. That's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
Like you, how was chucking away this for 4.5 years? That really does, we're 41 weeks in, so we're far away from like 4.5 years. But, what kind of determination do you need to really just stick with it for that length of time?
It's you have to be in some way, some kind of obsessive, I think. Yeah. And I think that I really think that my once a week challenge that I put on myself was a big part of being able to stick it out. I think if I did the thing that a lot of people do where they're like, I've got my full-time job and I'm just going to do this, like whenever I get a video, I'll upload it and that kind of thing. And I right off the bat was like, nope, Monday morning, 6:30 a.m. every week, a video is going out. And I think in the four or so years that I've been doing this, I've only ever missed 2 or 3, and I've put up extra ones other times. So I probably more than made up for it. But I think that was a really, really important part for me, because then there was always this internal pressure to do it. And it helped with my obsession of it. But yeah, I do think that it's like you said, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And you do have to have a certain kind of determination, and you really have to love doing it. Like I absolutely love making the videos that I make. I love rambling on about camera gear and techniques. And I think it's not something that I like talk about a lot, because there's just not like a place to talk about it. But it's like, I bought a camera 4 years ago, the first camera I've ever owned. Like, I'm not one of those guys like Peter or Maddie or whoever who like was like a DP or a professional photographer or doing any kind of work like that before. It's like, I was like, ooh, cameras are cool. I'm going to go start a YouTube channel. I picked up awesome. An A60 or an A6000 and like just started my channel. And I was off to the races, and then eventually got so obsessed with improving my quality and my technique and my editing and all that kind of stuff that I found myself just babbling about it all the time anyway. And so then the channel kind of naturally morphed into a channel about that stuff. And most of what I've been doing over the past 2.5 years or so is just relaying information that I'm gathering. I learn something. I get to a point where I feel like, okay, I feel comfortable enough about this concept that I feel like I could pass it on to people who are where I was a year ago, or are where I was 3 months ago, or whatever, like people who might not know this. And so really it's just this kind of passing down of information. And then of course the gear reviews specifically are just more so like I go test things out, and if they work for me, I say good things. And if they don't work for me, I either don't do the review or I tell people about the problems that I had, so it's really interesting. And I think about this often is like, what made me keep going? Because for that first year and a half, maybe even 2 years, like, not a whole lot was happening on the channel. Like I was getting 100 views and I didn't have many subscribers. And then all of a sudden a couple of videos help it skyrocket, and the growth really started to happen. But it took a long time, or what felt like a long time. Like you guys said, like you're not even quite a year in on the podcast yet. And it's like at that point in my channel, like nothing was happening. Like it was dead.
I mean, the thing is that, I'm always, when I contact people that I think, would be great to have on the show, I'm always totally honest about the fact that we're a really small podcast, because that's the truth of it, And I mean, but even for us, it's, we're now like 41 weeks in, and we are at a completely different point compared to where we were when we first started out. And what's super like addictive almost is like on the audio version of the podcast, in the like analytics bit, you have like there's like a world map, and you can see where people are when they're listening to you, and whenever there's a new little dot that pops up, it's like, hey, somebody's listening to us in Cincinnati. Yay! Awesome.
Yeah.
So
I totally hear that. Yeah. Comments for me. The comment section is, and people like to say where they're from. They say like, hello from the Philippines, or hello from India, or hello from Switzerland, or whatever, like, and it's so cool to know that you're connecting with people all around the world. It's a weird and fantastic feeling. And I still, to this day, as ridiculous as it is, I still try and answer every single comment that I get on my channel, and every single DM that people send me. It's difficult to handle, but I'm still trying my best anyway.
I think you need staff now.
I've got a couple of people helping me out, not with the comments specifically, but with some other stuff now that I'm super thankful for. But
that's amazing.
Where was the point where you all of a sudden realized that something seems to be happening on your channel?
Oh geez. I did try and do a review of my first set of true wireless earbuds. It was like an Indiegogo campaign that I backed, and I finally got these earbuds in, and I was like, oh, it would be cool to be one of the first people to review these, because everyone's just getting their shipment of these, and eventually they're going to go full on sale. So I was like, okay, I'm a tech reviewer now. I'm going to try this. And so I did that, and seeing that video get, I forget what it was, like 15,000 views in the first month or something like that. And I was just like, just like, it was this crazy thing, seeing my vlogs, which obviously are like, vlogs aren't searchable. Nobody's looking for like what Dunna did on a Wednesday afternoon. Like, so no one's going to find that unless I specifically send them there. Whereas this opportunity of using YouTube as a search engine and being at the end of that search, that was kind of a light bulb moment for me on what I could do with the channel. And I just, like I always suggest to everyone, I just did it as for fun, hence Dunna Did It. It's supposed to be for anything that I want to do. And so I just did something that I thought might be fun, and I had a lot of fun doing it. And so then it kind of kept creeping back into it. It was still mostly vlogs at that point, but there was definitely a light bulb there where I was like, okay, YouTube is a search engine first and foremost. And so if I can kind of play off of that, there's the chance that I can grow this thing to be something else. And so I started to kind of incorporate that more and more. And then eventually I had a couple of gear reviews that took off as well, and really started to grow my channel. But I do think that earbud review, which is, it's still up. I don't really take anything down. So if people want to go watch it, it's probably really bad. But yeah, it's that was kind of a light bulb moment, for at least for the possibility of what the channel could be, kind of thing. So
you mentioned a little earlier about you need to have fun. You need to enjoy what you do with this type of thing, right? And that always comes through. Mm-hmm. I was on the phone to Kersten this morning, and I talked at him, not with him. I talked at him about white balance for 20 minutes.
Yeah, and that is exactly why we started a photography podcast. Because we kind of figured here in the beginning. We figured, there must be other nerds out there who like to talk, gear and photography and all that kind of stuff. There must be other people out there. So we literally just started out because that's what we did anyway. So we might as well kind of record it somehow and see what happens. And so it's in our own little way, it's been it's been a fun journey. And I think when we first started out, like, we didn't know how this was gonna pan out in the end. Although it originally, in the very beginning, it really gave us like a lot of kind of structure throughout the week, because very much like you, we put one episode out a week, and so we record like on a Monday and then we release it on a Thursday. Typically that's what we used to do anyway. And so it was at a time of total national lockdown, when everything was shut. You couldn't go outside. Every day was the same, and you forgot what day of the week it was. Half the time, it was just giving us that little structure. We went like, oh, it's Monday, we got to record a podcast, and oh, it's Thursday, we got to put it out, and then the same thing happened again next week, the following week, and so it just went on for us. And then all of a sudden, it just became part of it. It's just part of what we do. It's like part of the raison d'etre almost, where it's just like that is just what we do every week, So, and so of course, things develop. Like for us, originally the early episodes, it was just us talking to each other, talking about photography stuff, and well, I would say we eventually hit on photography. There was like just a lot of other stuff that you talk about when you talk to a friend, basically. And then eventually we thought, wouldn't it be cool if we had guests on the show and we could talk at somebody else, basically, and originally, it was like mainly friends of ours that we got on the show, other photographers that we knew that we'd worked with and stuff, and that'd be interesting. And then it just kind of spiraled, I wouldn't say it spiraled out of control, but I got to the point where now it's like, every time we do an episode, it's like a school day. Because even for us, like we learn so much from, talking to you about YouTube and, talking to other guests, that we had in the past. It's like, no matter whether somebody's like an expert, I don't know, wildlife photographer or Photoshop expert or whatever it is, that's like always so much that we ourselves could take away from that, which that just gives you enough drive to just carry on throughout the next week. Yeah. How, like, when, because I've noticed that recently you've changed a lot of things about your channel. Like the backgrounds are starting to look like really super slick. I'm really liking that green light, by the way.
Yeah, thank you.
So, what's your kind of plan for the next kind of year or so?
Plan, hey? I mean, I've got a handful of things kind of on the go. The changes that I've made recently, I mean, we moved right at the start of when everything started to kind of shut down for COVID. We moved into a 2-bedroom apartment. And so now I have the second bedroom is my little studio. So I'm in a little 9x9 foot bedroom with the window blacked out so that I can use all my lights and stuff. And it's been this kind of slow, very slow, gradual build up to trying to figure out what wall works best to shoot against and where do I want to stand, and is there a way that I can like leave things set up in the room so I'm not constantly setting up and tearing down and that kind of thing. And again, the switch over to full time has given me a little bit extra time to really lay into it. So instead of like, okay, I've got 30 minutes to experiment and then I have to start recording a video one way or another, it's like now I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to spend the whole day playing around with different angles and different color grading, and I'm going to take a shot and put it into DaVinci and pull it up and grade it and see if it works. And like, okay, maybe if I overexpose it, blah, 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 blah. Like I had a whole bunch more time to spend with that. So that's probably why you've been seeing the extra changes, is honestly just because I have time to play with more things now. But as far as where things are going in the future here, I've got a couple of different kind of types of videos that I want to start cycling between. I've got one series coming up called Can Dunna Do It, which is essentially, there's a page on my website right now. There's a bar at the top with all the navigation or whatever, and there's, I think it says like challenge me or something like that. And so people can go there and leave a challenge, something that they want me to try and tackle. And so I've got a couple of those that are, I've gotten a decent amount of really great suggestions. And so I've got a couple of those in the works right now with some cool sponsors and stuff like that I think that's going to make a really cool series. And it's really interesting. And the whole channel started because I'm obsessed with learning about this stuff and then passing on the information that I learn. And so it just seems like a perfect fit to do something like that. But then there's also, I've got certain tutorials and certain reviews. And then I've got the new short series, the Dunna Quick Tips, And so it's kind of about, it's going to be about making sure that I'm kind of rotating between all those different types of content that I'm putting out. And trying to make sure that I'm not leaving anybody behind either. The one thing about my channel when it first started to get more popular was that I was primarily making content for Aps-C users. And then because of the way that my channel was expanding and the growth of this business, I was able to move into full frame and started shooting more full frame and stuff. And I kind of brought my content along with me there. And what I realized very quickly is that as you get into the more advanced gear or the more advanced techniques, there are less people there. Some people drop off before there, or some people just aren't there yet. And so it's like this pyramid where, like, as you get into the more advanced stuff, there's just less people there for one reason or another. And I kept having requests for, like, hey, are you ever going to review this new exciting Aps-C lens that came out? And it's like, well, I don't shoot a lot of that anymore. So I haven't been talking about it, but I don't want to necessarily leave anybody behind. So I'm going to be focusing a little bit more on beginner stuff with the shorts, and then going back to some more kind of Aps-C content and kind of fulfilling that need for people who are like what I was 2 years ago, where you just picked up your first Aps-C camera and you're like, I don't know what lens to buy, that kind of thing. Because there are lots of channels out there talking about all the new exciting full frame stuff, and I still will, but so that's kind of one of the other things going on this year. Then there's the Patreon is another one that's very exciting, and I hope that we can continue to grow that. And there's a lot of exciting stuff happening over there. So I think that's my 2021 plans right now. Maybe some merch or something like that.
It's interesting. It's interesting what you said about there being sort of a bigger base of beginners as opposed to advanced. Because Nick and me in another job that we do is we work for a music service. So we're both musicians. Nick is actually an audio engineer also. And nice. And as part of that, we run another YouTube channel called Learn, Play, Repeat. And what that essentially is in a nutshell, it's we've basically filmed professional musicians perform great pieces. Like, I don't know if you're familiar over in Canada with ABRSM and Trinity. Graded music exams. Do you do that in Canada? I'm not sure.
I mean, yeah, I think through the school side of things. Yeah.
So basically, so the idea was that since the music centers that the music trust that we're working for runs, they also are exam centers. So the idea was basically to create really high quality versions of these pieces being performed, in front of the camera for kids to listen to them when they trying to choose which piece they want to start practicing, but also to get a really good performance of it, and also to help them to play along essentially. So that was the idea. And so what we found is that all of the early beginners type grades, so grades 1, 2, and maybe 3, those are the ones that get a ton of the views. And then the higher you go, grade 4 or 5, it really is like a pyramid, with a wide base, and then it really just it kind of narrows down. And then as you get to the really difficult grades, there's like hardly anybody there who ends up watching that. So it's
I found that like the camera gear space is very similar to that, where you're like, everybody buys a beginner camera at some point, but not everybody makes it to a more advanced camera, or to more advanced techniques. It's like some of them either get through that beginner stuff and then decide, what, this actually isn't for me. I don't want to invest any more time, energy, money into this. And then, some people, it diverts into something else. Like maybe they end up really enjoyed being a boom operator, and so they move into that area or something along those lines. Like there is this kind of pyramid where people shift to something else or decide to learn on their own or whatever it happens to be. But that's really interesting that it applies there too. Yeah.
How did you find switching from Aps-C cameras to full frame? Like, as far as your own production and your own workflow is concerned, did that make any difference at all, or did you find it made a massive difference?
I found that I think one of the places where I really appreciated it was in the grading, in color grading. I felt like there was just a lot more to play with. And then going from 8-bit to 10-bit when I got the A7S III was another huge jump in grading. But I do like grading my A7 III over my A6600 if I can. It's not a huge significant thing. It's just like it's just a nice little touch. It's a little bit more to play with. You can push it a little bit harder. It looks just a little bit cleaner, but honestly, I still like in my last video I shot it with actually a couple of my last videos I've been shooting with the A7S III and the A6600. And then my A7 III has kind of become like a photos only camera lately for whatever reason. I've just been using the A6600 as kind of a B cam because it's really handy. I love how small it is. I'm right now actually I'm shooting with it and the Tamron 17-70, the new lens that they've got out now. And so I've been playing around with that a lot, and it's so handy to just have like tiny body with a reasonably small lens that's versatile, that kind of works for everything. But yeah, the switch over was weird at first, and then now it's a little hard to go back when I do, mostly just because getting as wide as I want to get is difficult on APS-C, because they just those 10 to 18 lenses for Sony anyway, there's really only one of them. You don't really have a whole lot of options.
When you first have transitioned from music to photography, was photography more like was that just an interest or a hobby that you got into, or? Yeah,
it was just, honestly, it started out with me like finding the photo editing capability in Instagram, like just the built-in like contrast, clarity, hue, saturation, whatever's in it. I don't even know what's in there anymore because I haven't used it in forever. But like, I just started like posting my breakfast, but instead of just taking a photo and posting it, I was taking a photo and then messing with it a whole bunch and seeing if I could make it look a little bit clearer or a little bit more artistic or whatever. And it was just little stuff like that. And then it eventually got to the point where it's like, okay, well, when I do this, when I push this slider too hard, the whole thing just falls apart. What's the answer to that? And then you go look on the internet and you find out that like the information that's in those files, there isn't enough there. So you need to have a camera that will get you enough information. So then I started taking photos in another app and pulling them into Instagram and then messing with them. And you get a little bit more out of it. And then eventually I just was like, okay, I can only do so much with a phone camera. I need a real camera. So did some research, and Sony was on the up and up at that point. So I locked into the Sony universe, and the rest is pretty much history. But yeah, it really just started with just like, I just love to learn. That's really what it came down to. It could have been anything. It didn't have to be photography, videography. I pick up hobbies like crazy, and most of them I drop after a little while. But like this one, it was familiar enough because there's a lot of crossover between video and audio, and photo too. But yeah, it was just everything matched together somehow.
There really is. I mean, for me, there's never really been much of a transition between music and photography, mainly because when I was really young, or I had like a video camera when I was a kid. So I was like shooting little videos and, making little films and cutting them on like 2 VCRs and all that kind of stuff back in those days. But, and then I spent like 25 years or something having a career in music. And then I sort of came back into photography, and I never found the transition being that dramatic, because ultimately it's, the process of making things is still the same. It's like, I had to explain this in some careers video that I shot this morning, where I'm explaining to students what it's like to be a photographer and a podcaster, actually, interesting enough. But I always find that the concept of creating something out of thin air is the same, whether you write a piece of music or whether you make a photograph or you create a video, because you start with nothing and you end up with something. And that in itself is totally fascinating. That's the thing. It's like, what do they say? It's the journey, not the destination, or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The creative process is so similar regardless of what you're creating. And I think with the YouTube channel too, something that I always say is like, it's so hard to make it in the music industry if you want to be an artist, if you want to like write a song, record it, perform it, and have people pay you for it. Like that's a really difficult thing to get to. It's definitely possible. There's definitely a lot of work that goes into it. And just like YouTube, like you're more likely to do better if you put out a whole lot of stuff, but it can be really expensive to make that stuff and so on and so forth. And I feel like I kind of got that with YouTube, where I got to just like, I just make whatever I want. And I make enough money at it to get by, you know, and it's this cool thing where like, I see as someone who owns a recording studio and sees artists come in and they're like, okay, we're going to make this one. This is going to be my hit. Like, this is going to be the one that launches me. And it's like, that's not always how it works sometimes, but not always. And so it's kind of cool to have had something that kind of worked like that for me, where it's like, I just put in enough work. I did whatever I wanted to, and enough people liked it that now I can support myself while doing that. But yeah, it's a fascinating thing that there's so much crossover between probably any creative style of art or media or whatever it happens to be. I'm sure there's a lot more that could be said about, you know, writing or drawing or any of those kinds of things too. It's like the creative process is so similar across all of those things.
Yeah, it's also completely unpredictable as to what type of content will do well and what doesn't. I mean, I always find this. We have this we have a bit of a joke, you know, behind the scenes all the time, because we can never predict which episode will do well and which ones don't. Like the oddest episodes that strangely do seem to be doing really well, and then there are like episodes where it's like, man, this is awesome, and it's like, you know, nobody else agrees. You know, and also what's funny is, and this is something that nobody's ever been able to explain to me actually, because, you know, we're doing an audio version and a video version of each episode. So, you know, for those of you who are new to this channel, by the way, if you're watching us on YouTube, there is an audio version of this on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and wherever awesome podcasts live, obviously. And if you're an audio listener, then you can not only listen to our sultry voices, but you can also see us in glorious Technicolor over on YouTube. So hit that up. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, ring the bell, and all the other stuff that people on YouTube say all the time. But I can't even remember where I was going with this.
You went into the subscriber pitch and you forgot.
Yeah, that's right. I've done this 41 times too many.
No, we've broken Kersten. Let's restart him.
Let me just take this up. Right. So what we're saying is that sometimes the video version of an episode will do really well, and the audio version of it will not perform well at all. And often it's the other way around as well, where like, you know, the video doesn't move and the audio version goes through the roof. And it's like, this doesn't seem to be any logic, rhyme or reason to it whatsoever. Yeah. You know, that's completely new to us. The only thing that we've noticed is that there's almost a pattern to it. Like when the audio is doing well, the video will not do that well, and vice versa. It seems to be, I don't know.
So it's a conspiracy. Strange. That's what it is. It's a conspiracy, I tell you.
It is, yeah.
I think it's the same 100 people that listen to our stuff, basically. And then, you know, if 60 of them in 1 week decide they don't have time to watch the whole video, just listen on audio, and then that goes up, whatever. I don't know.
This is part of what I love about YouTube. It's not just making the videos, but I love the guessing game and playing the YouTube game, and like, why did that video work and this one didn't? And why did that video start out slow, but then 6 months in, all of a sudden exploded? And now, like, my most viewed video on my channel is this one about, it's the one about splitting a photo for Instagram to do a two-sided carousel post or whatever. That's for whatever reason, that one is the most viewed video on my channel, but right out the gate, not a whole lot. 6 months in, all of a sudden it took off, and like trying to figure out those kinds of things is really interesting. Yeah. The only thing that I can think of for the podcast, for the video podcast versus audio podcast, is that YouTube is a search engine. So the ones that do well on YouTube for you guys are probably have some kind of searchable something to them, whereas podcasts aren't generally as as searchable. Like people will search out photography podcast, but that's about as far as it goes. They're not looking for specific topics as much, but that's just me playing the game and guessing.
Yeah, sure. Do you like obsess about things like keywords and searchability of your videos and stuff like that?
Yeah,
of course he does.
Yeah, a little bit. I get there's definitely a certain amount of that I get obsessive over, and then I kind of hit a wall, and I'm like, you know what? That's enough. Whatever, video's going up, like it'll do what it does, and I walk away, and I'm grumpy about having spent so much time thinking about it. Sometimes it's really obvious, but the thing that I've been doing lately is trying not to focus so much on search and focus more on humans. And their emotional reactions. I'm talking about like thumbnails and titles and stuff like that, because as much as YouTube is a search engine, once people search for your stuff, and YouTube is pretty smart about showing them the right kinds of stuff, you have to get them to click amongst the other 20 things that are on that page, kind of thing. And that's where you have to really start working to play with humans. So it's this funny balance between keywords and stuff that people are going to search, but then also wording it in a way that is enticing and mysterious and makes people go, what's it going to be? You know, I did a video recently on my Sigma 24-70, which is like my all around lens. And I didn't put Sigma 24-70 anywhere in the title. It says, and there's a big question mark in the thumbnail, so you don't know what lens it is. And right off the bat, it did really well because people were like, probably saying like, what lens is he going to talk about? Like I searched for all around full frame Sony lens or something like that. And there's a big question mark on this thumbnail. I got to know, you know? So kind of playing with that thing. Whereas I used to, 2 years ago, I probably would have just said Sigma 24-70 review, Sony E-mount, put all of the keywords, as many keywords as I can put in a title. Yeah. So it's interesting to play that game, and I have some tools that I use that trying to help me make it work.
Yeah. I mean, this again is a really good example of how, through actually practicing it, you get better over time. And that's, of course, I mean, as we know, like as musicians, we know that applies to guitar or drums or whatever. The more hours you spend hammering it out on the guitar, the better you'll get. There's no way you won't get better, And I guess the same thing really applies to a discipline like YouTube, for example, or actually photography as a whole. That's definitely a thing where I think, like, the more pictures you take, the better you'll get. There's no way around that. So
yeah.
So how have you found? I can't remember what I was going to ask actually. We're going to cut this bit out. Or make it more. Well,
actually, one little addition to what you just said is even just like the idea of practicing something over and over is one thing, but I feel like the process of what we do with YouTube or titles or whatever it is almost more like when you get to that point in your practice where you're recording and listening back. And the listening back to what you've done is almost like looking at those analytics and being like, okay, what worked and what didn't. It's just like listening back to your recording of yourself playing through scales and being like, okay, am I out of time? Are my notes nice and even? All those kinds of things. So it's like, it really is almost like that next step of like really effective practicing too, which is really cool.
I think keywords is a funny one. A long time ago, I started a an engineer's kind of YouTube channel. How to mix and record and do tips on doing this, tips on doing that, and it became such a chore to work out why something was working and why another video wasn't. That work then got in the way as well. At the time I was in full-time work, working in corporate, and it's like, what? I'm analytical. It's what I do for a living. I still can't work it out. It made no sense to me whatsoever. And it's like YouTube, you can, it's just. Yeah. And part of it, I think, is if you've only got a few videos, 10, 20, 50, kind of like you said, actually it's a lot harder to gauge. You're such a small sample set to go, that's why. You need a few more to really kind of boost that up and to get a bit more confidence in choosing those right keywords. But having seen your channel grow, You talk about your thumbnails as well. They stand out. You can pick out, you know it's your video when you scroll through a list of search results, because you can tell by the style of thumbnail every time. There's a handful of other YouTubers you can do that to as well, and you can pick it out and you go, I know exactly who's done that video. I'm going to click on it. And that's your brand. It's part of your brand. And right now you're nailing it. You're absolutely nailing it. Just before we came in this podcast, I was just watching your latest video as well, on the multi-photo carousel Instagram post, and slicing them up into various bits and pieces. And your style has changed so much over the past, even just over the last few months, in such a way. And I think just to go back to what you were saying earlier about personality coming through, that comes through more than ever right now. Yet I think you're disseminating more information than ever, all at the same time. So whatever you're doing, man.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's good to hear. It's good to hear that it's coming through, because it's like exactly what you just said is what I've been working on for the past 6 months. I've been working on my titles and thumbnails and trying to figure out what works. And just like you said, like, especially when you're smaller and you don't have the sample set, it's really difficult to know what's actually working and what's not. And then you throw on top of that there's a million variables. Like, so trying to decide that like, oh, it was this one thing that made that video work. Like, that's not happening. Like, you're not getting that close. You're kind of grasping in the dark, but like you can take educated guesses. But like, yeah, as far as the actual videos go, it's something that I've been playing with a lot. And for a while there, I kept getting comments where it was like, this guy talks too much, or, those kinds of things. And for whatever reason, in this social media mindset where like you get 100 good comments and then you get that one bad one. And I'm like, okay, should I take that seriously? Like maybe I should get to the information and stop trying to force my personality or my thoughts or whatever on people. And so for a while there, I did. I actually was just like, hey, today we're going to be talking about this thing. Like, let's get into it. And then I would just go through it. And what I noticed is that I stopped having a really solid connection with my subscribers. People weren't coming back as often. I wasn't growing subscribers as much. Like I was still getting a decent amount of views and stuff, but it was kind of like I just become a textbook kind of channel. Like people were coming, they were taking the information and then they were moving on. And I was like, that's not going to work long term, probably. Like I think the thing that people dismiss or that they don't understand about what Peter McKinnon is doing is that he's selling Peter McKinnon all the time. And he's so good at it, and it's so entertaining and it's so fun. And like he is, again, like another channel that's saying a lot of the same information that you can find all over YouTube, but he's doing it in such a Peter way that's why he has this strong connection with his subscribers. And so something that I've been trying to do over the past couple of months is figure out a way where I can be just as informational as I was when I was getting to the point and not talking too much, but also bring in my own personality and that kind of stuff. And part of it has come down to just like, I'm scripting a lot less and I'm bullet pointing a lot more. And I'm also absolutely ruthless in my edit now. And it is a very difficult thing to do when you can see somewhere in the back of your mind, you're like, I know why I just talked for 3 minutes about white balance in this video, but the thing that I said at the start of that 3 minutes and the last sentence of it are enough information. So cut out the middle part, and that's really hard to do when you're editing yourself. I think if you're editing somebody else, it's easier to see that you can probably chop that all together. But that's something that I've been trying to do to try and find that balance of information and personality, because I know that there's a good balance of people that come for both. So trying to figure out basically what you just said, like, trying to figure out how I can make sure that everybody's saying, Dunna, you just nailed it.
That's it, man. and you have to think of yourself when you're on YouTube as part of the entertainment industry, and that's just the generation that we live in now, that people expect to be entertained as well as get all the information they want, and they want it as quickly as possible, as concisely as possible. And I don't want to know stuff that I didn't come here to find out about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's we, being perhaps slightly older, certainly me and Kersten, we may not be that. We may be used to, just getting the information that we need. But most people who are watching YouTube are, younger than us, and that's most of your audience. So you've got to cater with it, while at the same time, of course, holding true to what you believe in and how you want to be. And I think that's what you've come to at a point now. Actually, you're doing it exactly how you want to do it. And thankfully, it fits exactly with your audience right now. And like I say,
what's funny? What's funny about this also is I noticed you doing your shorts, recently, as in like short videos, obviously not shorts, because that would be weird. But anyway, so I was watching some of those, and I kind of thought I really liked them. And my immediate thought was, that's exactly where Peter McKinnon's 2-minute Thursdays or 2-minute Tuesdays used to be. Do you remember? 2 minutes of like a set subject, 2 minutes, well, plus minus obviously, but a very short video that would just kind of target one particular piece of information. He would teach it in a really engaging way, and he'd make a really interesting video about it, whatever. But ultimately, that would be like, how to use, I don't know, graduated filter in Photoshop or whatever else. And it'd be like 2 minutes, bang, you watch it, you go like, oh, I know how to use this now. Dang, done. And when I saw your shorts, I think I saw one where you talked about the camera dial. And I'm like, as a photographer, and people ask me about this like all the time, by the way, it's just the same sort of questions. And you kind of go, that's awesome. Right. Slap straight in there. It's actually just the right bite-sized kind of length, that you don't need any more than that to get that information, and it's perfect. And then that made me think, okay, so where have Peter McKinnon's 2-minute Tuesdays gone, and how that channel has changed away from what it was like when I first started watching it, I guess, like how many years ago that was now. I can't remember. And then I immediately started to realize that you're actually really filling that void. You're really fitting into that void, because his channel's moved on to some completely different place by now. And you're really coming into that vacuum. And that's really cool, because that's exactly why I started watching those kind of YouTube videos in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that tells me that there is a massive audience right there for exactly that.
Very cool. Well, thank you for saying that. And it's really interesting. I've been noticing this lately, and kind of going back to what I was saying before about the pyramid of viewership kind of thing, is that once you as a person, or as a person on YouTube or whatever, are at a certain level, you kind of have to always keep reassessing, like, okay, now I look like this to the world. So what do I need to be in order to hit my target audience? And like, do I want to keep trying to serve the same people, or am I looking at a new audience now? And I think that Peter is a great example of someone who has kind of shifted as his channel's grown with what it makes sense for him to be making. I think that if he, from a purely kind of growth standpoint too, like where like, I think if he just kept making tutorials and that kind of stuff, I think that there is a bit of a plateau there to some extent, whereas like he builds it around his personality, like we were saying, and I think that there's so much more potential there for him as kind of almost just like a celebrity, like you said, like an entertainer, on the platform, where there is still some information and that kind of stuff, but so much of it is just, it feels almost vloggy, with a sprinkle of camera gear and a sprinkle of tutorials and that kind of stuff in there. And it's something that I've been finding myself having to do a little bit lately too, where it's like, okay, now my channel's at a certain size. People are looking at me for certain things. They're asking for certain things. I have to kind of just make a decision. It's not that I have to do anything specifically, but I have to make a decision. Do I just keep doing whatever the hell I want to do? Or do I fulfill some of these requests? Or is there some kind of middle ground where I can do a little bit of both and that kind of thing? And it's really interesting. And I think that some of the best channels on YouTube are the ones who are constantly kind of playing with that, going with the waves of like, where's your channel at? Where's the viewership at? Who is your target viewership? That kind of thing. And like you said, kind of filling the gaps of like, what is needed on YouTube or on whatever platform it is that they happen to be. And I love the shorts for that too. I had a laundry list of video ideas that I was like, I can't really make a 10 to 12 minute video about that. Like if I do make a video, it's going to be a really short video.
Yeah.
And so then all of a sudden YouTube is like, hey, we're going to steal TikTok and Reels and we're going to make these little 1 minute vertical videos. And I was like, nailed it. That's perfect. I can squish these down. Most of them probably should be 3 or 4 minute videos, but I squish them in under a minute and just give like just the bare minimum of information on that topic. I've got one coming out tomorrow that basically just talks about how to get the blurry background, and it's like, you only need a minute to talk about that really. Yeah. And then if I want to go more in depth, I can make a full video on it later. But yeah, it's cool to analyze and decide who you want to be and what your audience wants and who your audience is and all that kind of stuff. I love the game.
I mean, it is, I think it's actually not that hard to come up with a massive list of, especially when you're aiming at beginners, because you can literally just take a camera body and go like, right, here's the dial. Today we're going to talk about, shutter priority, and tomorrow we're going to talk about aperture priority, and the day after we're going to talk about manual, and then we're going to, and it's like the list can just carry on, and really each one of those aspects really doesn't really take that much explanation. It's each thing on its own is really a bite-sized bit of info. When you take the whole thing, when you put the whole thing together and you're trying to explain how a camera body works, that is a massive undertaking. And that will be like your, 6-hour Jared Polin, tutorial course or something like that, But actually just taking these little bits, that can be really, really useful. Yeah, and, there's an interesting, that's an interesting thing. We had a guest on the show, Tommy Reynolds, a few months ago, and he said something really interesting because he's on his YouTube channel. What he does is he kind of creates one video for his audience, and then he does one video for himself. And often the ones that he does that are just for himself, those are just things that he wants to do, and he doesn't really care whether anybody else is into it or not. But that's just how he kind of keeps himself sane, and it kind of makes sense to him, and that's how he operates. But he said, when he first started doing this, and I asked him actually, what was it like when the first time you got a negative comment or a thumbs down on one of your videos? Like, how did that make you feel? And like his response was like, that was all the verification I needed. I kind of thought, awesome, wicked. How do you deal with the sort of response that you get to your videos?
Not well. No, it's funny. It's kind of like I was saying a little bit earlier that you can get 100 positive comments and one negative comment, and for whatever reason, that one negative comment will stick in your head for so long, and you'll just forget about those 100 positive comments. And it really is a difficult thing, and I think it's just a part of human nature that we do that to ourselves. It's really sadistic. But yeah, I've been going back and forth on how I deal with it. Sometimes I do respond if I can muster up the mental capacity to give them the benefit of the doubt and assume that they're trying to help in some way, shape, or form, and they're not just being a jerk. I will try and engage in conversation with them. And there have been a couple of times where either I've turned people around and been able to further explain what I meant by the thing that they misunderstood in the video. And then they're like, oh, thank you so much for taking the time to explain this. Like, big fan, subscribed, those kinds of things. That's happened a couple of times. And then sometimes you find out that they were just trying to be a jerk and they don't really care what you have to say. And then you hide them from your channel and you keep that negative talk out of your comment section, basically. So, but it is difficult not to. Something that I've been trying to do lately is just try not to engage as much as possible, and remind myself that before that one negative comment where the person says this guy talks too much or something, I probably got 100 comments that said, "Great video, Dunna, super helpful. I'm going to go try this right away." You know, those kinds of things. And the community is overwhelmingly positive. For my personal experience anyway, is that the community is overwhelmingly positive. And the reason that it feels negative is because in human nature, we focus on the negative. We dwell on it more than we need to. But I think if you made a spreadsheet, you would see that it is actually more positive than it is negative.
Well, that really also kind of refers back to like the way that people deal with COVID, for instance, the whole pandemic thing, because it's so easy to just be overwhelmed by all the negative aspects of it, the lockdowns and the limitations to life and, all the things that, we can't do anymore. How do you deal with that? I mean, what is it actually like in Alberta at the moment? Like, what are you in a lockdown or what's happening?
Yeah, kind of, yeah. Like there are a decent amount of restrictions right now. There's no curfew or anything like that. I believe the federal government is just putting in place provincial travel restrictions, which is technically, I think, is the first time that there will be travel restrictions between provinces. The border between Canada and the States is pretty much locked down and has been for quite a while. Travel restrictions internationally have been in place for a while now, but the Canadian government is now, I think, mandating that the airlines and stuff who travel to like sun destinations are basically, it's a no-go at this point. I think it's like a mild version of what we see in the States, where it's like there's this half of people who I shouldn't even say half, maybe there's a third of people who just like don't seem to believe that anything is wrong. And then there's a third of people who are upset that there's not more happening to try and make things better. And then there are the other third of people who are upset that the government is doing as much as they're doing to try and make things better because they are worried about the economy. So everybody's just scared. And this is something that my wife and I have talked about a bunch lately, is that like trying to have empathy for everybody and their sides, even if you don't believe what they believe or whatever. It's like trying to just realize that everybody's scared, and that the cliche saying that we're all in this together. It's like we are, and it sucks that it sucks that it's hitting the economy so hard, and it sucks that people are literally getting sick and dying from this, and like it sucks that every government in the world, well, I shouldn't say every government, a couple of them handled it really well, but pretty much all of them seemed to have absolutely no idea what they were doing, especially when this all started out. So it's I feel blessed that I've been able to work from home for the most part on both of my jobs. I set up my little home studio here, and I can make my YouTube videos here, and I don't have to go out much. But it's empathy and sickening positivity is how I've been getting through it.
Don't worry, the UK led the way on not knowing what to do and getting it all wrong. So you're all right. You're all right.
It's like nobody had any idea that this could even happen.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh, well, we stay positive and we just move forward.
Exactly.
Yeah, Kay and I say this every other episode. If it wasn't for COVID, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now.
Yeah, it's true.
You know, we just wouldn't. It's done. I've had a really hard time over the last 12 months or so. I found it very difficult. It's built up over the months has gone by, and every so often you get a little moment where you go, "My God, if it wasn't for this awful situation, I wouldn't have done this, or this. Yeah. There's no way I would have done those things. I wouldn't have had the time. I wouldn't have had the inclination. I just wouldn't have felt like, oh, that can wait. I'll do that another time. None of these things would have happened. And I couldn't be more grateful for that. And so, you know, that's actually in the most positive way, setting up myself and Kersten up for post-COVID in a really good way. That actually, all right, it's taken us longer to get to certain places that we wanted to get to, but in the long run, I think it's going to serve us well. And that's the way whether we'll see if it works out that way, but that's the way I choose to look at it.
Whereas, you know, there was a time, like right at the very beginning of the first lockdown, which was I think it was around March time 2020, which is like lockdown here, and basically the UK just went into full on lockdown. It was like everything was like, you know, every store had a sign up there going, you know, gone fishing. Basically everything's shut, and you know, people had to stay at home and you couldn't go out, and you had like, what was it, like an hour a day of exercise or something that you were allowed to do? Yeah. You know, and of course at that time, people were even more scared than they are now because it was this total unknown. There were no vaccines on the horizon. It was just like, you know, I remember like going to like a superstore, like a supermarket, and every time you came around a corner and you went into an aisle, and there'd be another person, like one other person at the far end of the aisle coming your direction, you could see the fear in their eyes. Like, whoa, there's another person, you know? And I remember coming out of this thinking, this is so far from normal. Yeah. This is like, you know, if anybody told me like a year before that this was what the world was going to be like, I would have told them to F off, basically, you know, because that would have been just a bad script for some bad B movie. And I remember like the first, probably, I don't know, maybe like the first week or something of that lockdown, where I was literally a little bit shell-shocked. I was like sitting at home thinking like, this can't be happening. I don't want my kids to see this and to grow up in a world like this, you know, blah, blah, and all that kind of stuff. And you go like, you know, the mind's like going crazy. And then I have a tendency I'm like one of these, you know, one of these punch bags that you punch, they fall over and then they bounce back again. That's just me. So like a weekend, I'm like, right, screw this. We're going to do something. Nick, what about this podcast thing? And then, you know, and then we're off to the races. So it's because you just have to kind of turn it around and just keep, you know, doing something. Otherwise, it's just going to drive you insane.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've heard people refer to it as the COVID pivot, where you're like, you take whatever's going on and you pivot with the fact that like, this is happening. You can't stop it from happening. So what can you do in the meantime or whatever? The world is going to be a very different place when this is all over. And it's not all negative. You know, like you said, like you guys wouldn't have done this podcast. I probably, there's a chance that I wouldn't have gone full-time YouTube because I wouldn't have had this opportunity the way that I got it, you know? So yeah, it's definitely not all negative. There's a lot of negative, but I am definitely one of the lucky ones who I've found a lot of positive in this. I've been lucky enough to get to spend a lot of time with my wife now because we're both working from home, and that's something that I feel super blessed with. And you know, I can work both my jobs from home basically, which is so wonderful. And you know, so I definitely you know, count my blessings every day in that case, but yeah, it's going to be a different place.
But of course, you know, in reality, at minus 30 outside, would you be going outside even if it wasn't, if there was no pandemic? We got underground parking. I could drive to work and get out and go back into my warm studio, but see, this is
probably not that much.
This is one of the things I've always like admired. Like I remember when you know, I was younger and I went to see family and stuff. And this because it's the one thing that we really don't have in Europe is like remote starters for cars. Yeah. So, you know, or you can like sit at the breakfast bar and just click a button and your car starts up. And then by the time you get to it, it's all nice and comfy and warm. Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like it should be mandatory here that when they sell a car, it should come with remote start. And they do a lot of the times, but our two vehicles unfortunately don't have that, but we do have underground parking, so we don't have to worry about it on the one vehicle.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier that when your first camera was a Sony A6000.
Yeah, I mean, technically, I did own an A5100 first, and this is actually kind of a funny story. My wife and I were going on holiday to my parents own a place in Mexico, and that's where they live most of the time now. So we were going down to Mexico. I was like, "This is it. I'm going to buy my first camera, and I'm going to take it on this holiday, get some pictures, maybe do a travel vlog type of thing." So I buy this A5100, and I get there. And I had also got like a couple of different lenses. So I'm switching lenses. I don't know that you have to protect your sensor or anything like that. So like I get to the end of that trip and my sensor is covered in dust because I'm like changing lenses on the beach. And like, it's just, I'm getting all these weird specks in my photos and I don't know why. So I take it back to Best Buy. I'm like, something is wrong with this camera. Give me a refund. And I know now what happened, but at the time I didn't. And they were like, well, we don't have any more of these A5100s, but the A6000 is the same price. So you can exchange it for this other camera. And I was like, okay, perfect. So I switched it out for an A6000. So I always talk about it like the A6000 is my first camera, but technically for about a month or like 16 days or something like that, I had an A5100 first.
Cool. So you've stuck with Sony all the way till now. Have you had a look at the A1?
I haven't yet. I was part of like I don't know. I'm on some list that Sony has where when they have new stuff out, they do like little webinars, and the product management team and stuff will talk through all the points and stuff. So I got the PowerPoint presentation, and it's really impressive looking. I've had a lot of people ask me if I'm going to make some content on it. And my general answer is probably not. And this kind of goes back to what we were talking about before about the pyramid. It's like I started making full frame content and I found it more difficult to get people interested in it because I think there are just less people that are at that point, at that same point as I am, where they're buying an A7S III or whatever, you know? So an A1 is even further up the scale. I mean, that's flagship. That costs almost $10,000 in Canada.
It's crazy.
So yeah, it's absolutely nuts. So it's very exciting. I think that the things that are inside it are really exciting. And the fact that like Sony does a pretty good job on delivering on promises, and they also do a pretty good job of like just not talking about the other stuff. Like when people are like, why didn't you do this? They're like, hey, take a look at the things that we did do, you know, like that kind of thing. And so I'm really excited about like, you know, the fact that they did the 8K with the essentially no record limit. Like it's pretty, from the tests that I've seen, like they're promising half an hour, but all the tests that I've seen have gotten like an hour or more. And I mean, everything else that went into that camera and the new processors and all that kind of stuff is very exciting. Oh, we have a friend.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
But yeah, I probably won't pick one up. I might get a loaner from Sony and it might be kind of cool to do some like, A1 versus A6100, see if I can get like their most expensive camera and their least expensive mirrorless camera and do a bit of a comparison or something like that. But yeah.
How did you, like when you first started with one camera, how did you sort of level up your kind of production value or whatever you want to call it, like over time? Did you eventually think like, oh, it might be a good idea to, I don't know, get hold of a GoPro and add that to the vlog, or how did you kind of move on from the A6000?
I think I just saved up and eventually got an A6500. Right. That was pretty much it. It was just kind of onto the next camera. I'm trying to remember whether I had two A6000s at one point. I definitely had two A6500s at one point. And would kind of always have like the option of an A cam and a B cam, or at least a backup if something was to happen. But yeah, it was like, I think it was A6000, then another A6000. And then I got rid of one A6000 and replaced it with a 6500, got rid of the other A6000, got another A6500, and like was kind of like this gradual leveling up. I'm also like like to, buy and sell things used, if I can, or at least I will sell things used and buy new if that's what I feel like is the right call. But so it's this kind of gradual leveling up, and then eventually the YouTube channel got to a point where it was making enough money to invest back into new gear that would then become reviews, that would then become more revenue, that would then become more gear, and that kind of cycle began. But yeah, off the bat, I think it was just I just saved up my pennies until I could upgrade into a camera that had 4K and it had IBIS and all those kinds of things. So that was the big one. And it had a microphone input, which was, I hated the A6000 for that.
Did you how useful do you think 8K is actually going to be for let's say content creation for YouTube? Do you think there's a point in that at this
yeah
point?
not really. Even it's tough to even say how useful 4K is right now. I shoot everything in 4K, and I love that I have from a creator standpoint, I love that I have the extra crispiness, and I love that I have a little bit of there's more information for color grading and that kind of stuff. But from an actual content consumption standpoint, I don't know who's shooting in 4K or 1080. Potato Jet, I think, still shoots all his stuff in 1080, or he did for a long time anyway. And it's I didn't know the difference. And the argument that people will always make is that if you have more Ks, you can punch in further. And it's okay, that's cool. I take my 4K footage and I punch into 2 times if I want to punch into 2 times anyway. I still upload it at 4K, and I don't think anyone can tell the difference really. Yeah. So it's tough to tell. And then as far as if someone's going to actually upload in 8K, how many people do you know with an 8K monitor or an 8K TV?
No one.
So I do think that there's it's cool from it's cool more from a technological standpoint, I think. And I love seeing when companies come out with their new flagships and stuff, because that eventually all of the engineering and all of the science that went into making that is going to trickle down into the more consumer level or intermediate level or even the other professional stuff that's not the $10,000 flagship, and so I think that's where I get really excited about things like the A1 and especially the processor that they have in it, and the readout speeds and the new sensor and all that kind of stuff. Because eventually that's going to start trickling down into the more consumer friendly stuff as well.
Have you ever been tempted to switching to a different manufacturer at all?
Yeah, I went into a camera store once and asked to hold a Canon, and I loved how it felt. Canon has my favorite ergonomics. Right. I just love the way that it feels in my hands, and that's been over a bunch of their cameras too. It's not even just one, but I think it was the EOS R when it came out. I was in a camera store and asked them if I could just play around with it for a minute, and just love the way that it felt in my hands. But I don't know. I'm pretty embedded as far as I've got a bunch of lenses. I know what a pain it's going to be to try and learn something new. And even when I was in that camera store playing around with the EOS R, not knowing where anything is and not understanding the menu system, and you can change the ISO with the touch screen, and I was that's weird. I don't know if I like that. And it's some stuff that would be really cool if I had the time to learn it, and I probably could make the time, but it's not necessarily a necessity for me to venture out in that direction. I get lots of people who are why didn't you incorporate blank camera or lens into this comparison? And I'm welcome to my channel. It's mostly Sony. That's just kind of what I've decided, I guess. But never say never. Who knows?
Yeah, it's kind of, I was thinking, it's difficult once you spend a lot of money on a whole range of different lenses and stuff, and I mean, that's really where the money is ultimately, is in the glass. And once you've invested into that, changing the whole system around, that's really when it's going to start to hurt your pocketbook. And it's just a pain in the neck having to sell all this stuff. And then, I did a little, just as an exercise not too long ago, I kind of, when I really didn't have anything else to do, I listed all of my Nikon gear, and, I checked out what I could get for it, at this moment in time. And like what I could, if I switched brands, like what could I get for the money without having to put anything in, anything extra in. And it was depressing. That's all I'm going to say. It's like, so I figured like that, I'm just going to stay put. I'm like super annoyed with the recording limit, and there's so many different limitations. But I think for what we're doing right now, it's fine. And at this moment in time, it's cool. In a year's time, the situation may be different. Who knows? But I might go for a Sony A6000.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I mean, I think that like there's not really a bad camera that's come out in the past couple of years. Like, this is the thing. Like, there's this war between consumers of these camera brands, and it's like, I don't know. Canon's making great stuff. Fuji's making great stuff. Nikon's making great stuff. Sony's making great stuff. Like everybody's there. Like nobody is really like fumbled in a while. Everything that I've been seeing come out is like, sure, they've all got pros and cons, and that's why review channels exist. Yeah. If the perfect camera really existed or could possibly exist, there would be no need for any of this. But really, like I think everybody's doing a great job right now, and my hat's off to the engineers and R&D teams who put this stuff together, because it's like so beyond what I can understand how you can even make some of these better. Like there are so many limitations physically or technologically that just I couldn't possibly begin to understand.
And the other thing is, of course, when you're talking about like beginners and people who are just trying to get into the game, into photography or into making YouTube videos or whatever. I mean, ultimately, you can actually go a long way just with your phone these days. I mean, there are so many channels where people just use an iPhone, to film just about everything. And again, that's just a great starting point, I think. If I compare that to my very first video camera when I was like, I think 10 or something, and it had like a tape in it, and it's like, it seems so ridiculous. But actually only recently, my mom actually sent me that camera, which she found in the attic or something, and there's still some of the original video 8 tapes. I don't know if you remember that format. It's it's an old format. And it'll be interesting. I mean, I have nothing to play this stuff on, obviously, these days, but it'll be interesting to see what's actually on it, because, that'll be like the 12-year-old me shooting weird sci-fi movies in the back of the garage.
Yeah. I still got my old digital 8, whatever Sony. It was a Sony camera too, funny enough. And it had the Sony NPF batteries on it.
Yeah.
And they still worked. I found it not too long ago, and I pulled it out, and this was like, from when I was like somewhere between 10 and 13 years old. And I pulled it out and charged up the batteries, and they still work. I don't know what kind of capacity they have anymore, but
yeah. Well, it's like, I remember the old, like the Sony Handycams, I think was, do you remember those? It's like, because my camera still works. It does play back, but the connector that you in the olden days connected to the TV via like a SCART lead or something, that doesn't work anymore. So I need to find a replacement for that. So otherwise I can't see anything. I think it's got a black and white viewfinder, which is like classic, man. Awesome.
That's awesome.
So I mean, it doesn't really take much these days to get started with any of that. Like a regular iPhone, or shall we say Android, will actually suffice. Oh no, we shouldn't. No, let's not say.
Let's just leave them.
Yeah, that's
a dirty word.
After my big spiel about like how every camera manufacturer is doing great, I'm just like, no Android.
We've just alienated half of our listenership in one swift stroke.
No, brilliant. I've never had the pleasure of attempting to use Android. So basically, since I had a touchscreen cell phone or mobile phone or whatever you want to call it, it's always been an iPhone. So
Yeah, same.
I just don't know. I'm ignorant.
Yeah, it's absolutely the same. I've never actually used an Android phone ever. One thing somebody gave me to try out once was a Windows phone. I think this was like years ago. And I have to say, I just looked at the thing like, what devil's work is this? Like, it was a toy basically, and I couldn't deal with it. And this is like, I don't know what I had at the time, like an iPhone 4 or something like that.
Yeah,
and
even totally.
So yeah, cool. So what's next for you now? So you like over the next few weeks, are you working on more videos, or what's your
trying to keep up with putting out a video a week while building up a couple of things. I know I've mentioned the Patreon a couple of times, so making some changes out over there, and that's a really new venture for me. So there's like a little bit of the front heavy admin kind of thing to get it rolling. So that's taken up a little bit of time. Like I said, I really am going to be looking forward to launching that Can Dunna Do It series. Try and make those something even bigger and better than my, regular content. There are a couple of online course opportunities that I've got on the horizon. I don't know how much I'm supposed to talk about them, but I'm working on some stuff there, and so that's very exciting to kind of get to branch out into some new platforms and new ways of looking at things. But for the most part, it's same old. Trying to keep regular on my once a week, and really just making sure that that's as valuable to people as it possibly can be, and make sure that I keep it steady and good quality.
Excellent. Now, I know you like a challenge, and we like a challenge too. In fact, we challenged one of our former guests, Ivan Weiss, to a portrait, like a self-portrait shootout, which is going to be the episode that aired last week from where we're now, but it'll actually be coming out tomorrow because we record these episodes in advance. So are you up for a challenge?
Sure.
You up for a photo shootout challenge?
Absolutely.
Oh, wicked.
Awesome.
Okay, cool. Right. Nick is like rubbing his hands. He's like, whoa, okay, let's go. Wicked. Now we've done it. We've come to the end of Camera Shake Podcast, episode 43, with this week's special guest, Dunna Did It. Be reminded that if you are listening to the audio version of this podcast, you can not only listen to our sultry voices, but also see our beautiful faces in full Technicolor over on YouTube. All you have to do is go to youtube.com/CameraShake. And if you are listening to this from the beautiful town of Vancouver, then please get in touch. We would love to hear from you. All you have to do is send us an email at camerashakepodcast@gmail.com, or you can hit us up on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, any of those beautiful platforms. Please get in touch. It'd be super awesome and interesting to hear from you. Now, that being said, without further ado, that's all from us for today. We will see you again next week in episode 44. See ya.